Dear colleagues, please take your seats. Dear members, before we begin, let me inform you that this meeting is being recorded. It will later be posted on the OSCPA's channels. Let me also welcome members who are participating in a meeting of the Standing Committee for the first time. To request the floor, please simply raise your nameplate. Should any delegation wish to raise an issue under point 8, any other business, please inform the International Secretariat at the podium in advance. Finally, please note that our meeting should conclude at 5 o'clock. First, we go to the item number 1 on the agenda, which is adoption of the agenda. A draft agenda has been circulated. Can we adopt the agenda? The agenda is adopted. The second item on our agenda is report of the President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Ms. Pia Kauma. A detailed report has been made available, so today I will focus on key highlights of my recent activities and the progress we have made in advancing the OSCE's core values and principles. Since our last meeting, I have been engaged in a series of diplomatic initiatives that reflect our Assembly's commitment to peace, security, and democratic resilience. Under the next agenda item, we will have time for in-depth discussions on the elections we observed last autumn. I kindly ask you to reserve your comments on those until then. The Russian Federation's full-scale invasion of Ukraine continues to have devastating consequences. In response, I have appointed 3 special rapporteurs to the Parliamentary Support Team for Ukraine to further strengthen our support within the OSCE's comprehensive security framework. I thank Karina Oderbrink from Sweden, Matti Raidma from Estonia, and Lucy Potutskova from the Czech Republic for taking on this additional responsibility. Last week, I traveled to Kyiv with members of our Bureau and the PSTU to reaffirm our solidarity. Our meeting in the Verkhovna Rada underscored our unwavering commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, democracy, and resilience. The OSCPA will remain fully engaged in supporting Ukraine in every way possible. You will recall that at the Mediterranean Forum in Dublin, we examined how best to strengthen our engagement with partners for cooperation, particularly in light of the evolving situation in the Middle East. This remains on our agenda. I thank delegations from Morocco, Algeria, and Israel for participating in this winter meeting. Earlier this month, I visited Ankara to emphasize Turkey's key role in the OSCE, an issue that will be further highlighted during our 2025 autumn meeting, which our Turkish colleagues have generously offered to host. Next month, I will lead a delegation to Israel and the West Bank to assess the situation on the ground and to explore opportunities for constructive engagement. One word on the work of OSCE field operations. Last October, I led a visit to Serbia with a delegation from 12 countries to strengthen our engagement with OSCE field operations. The professionalism of OSCE field staff and the cooperation of local authorities were evident and reinforced the importance of these missions. Building on this momentum, we are preparing for a visit to Tajikistan this spring to deepen our engagement in Central Asia. I look forward to your active participation. As we have had the opportunity to debate over the past 2 days, the OSCE's role in fostering dialogue and cooperation is more critical than ever. I regret that Foreign Minister Valtonen was unable to be here yesterday. However, the Bureau had an opportunity to exchange with her in Helsinki last month. This followed discussions in Valletta, where we addressed the future of the OSCPA and our strategic priorities. As we approach the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, I want to thank your delegations for their unwavering support in strengthening the OSCE and advancing its mission. Deep changes in the international environment have put multilateralism under increasing strain, making strong advocacy for our shared principles more important than ever. It is only through our collective efforts that we can reverse this trend and ensure the OSCE remains a vital platform for dialogue and cooperation. I therefore thank you all for your dedication to the OSCE. Are there any comments or questions? Madame de Rieder, you have the floor.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin. Ich möchte noch mal herzlich dazu gratulieren, dass Sie in der Tat Feldmissionen auf den Weg gebracht haben. Insbesondere, Sie haben ja darüber berichtet, dass Sie jüngst in der Ukraine waren. Ich hatte selber Gelegenheit, nach Serbien mitzureisen und ich begrüße ausdrücklich, dass Sie auch vorhaben, nach Israel und in die palästinensischen Gebiete zu fahren. Aber mit Blick auf die Ukraine, Frau Präsidentin, müssen wir doch auch im Blick behalten, was die Konsequenzen einer solchen Reise sind. Ich freue mich ausdrücklich, dass die sogenannten Big Four-Positionen jetzt wieder besetzt werden konnten. Aber wir sollten auch den Mut haben und, weil Sie die Professionalität angesprochen haben, auch diese Konfliktmanagement zu betreiben und zu schauen, wo können wir die Ukraine noch besser unterstützen, auch als Parlamentarierinnen und Parlamentarier. Ich glaube, dass es ganz wichtig ist, der Ukraine beizustehen in Solidarität mit ganz pragmatischen Instrumenten, die da wären, auch die Vorbereitung der anstehenden Wahlen mit zu begleiten. Ich glaube, das ist immens wichtig, denn Wahlbeobachtungen, das wissen wir ja alle, sind ein zentrales Instrument unserer Tätigkeit. Und hier, glaube ich, bedarf es unserer Unterstützung, auch im Bereich der Capacity Building, dass wir das ausbauen. Und wir sollten dabei immer klar machen, das ist mein ausdrücklicher Wunsch, Frau Präsidentin, an Sie, aber auch an die gesamte Versammlung, deutlich zu machen, beiden Seiten, in deren Zange wir uns ja befinden, ich meine damit die USA und Russland, dass es inakzeptabel ist für die Ukraine, und das muss unsere stetige Botschaft sein, einen Diktatfrieden zu akzeptieren. Das muss auch Ihre, Frau Präsidentin, Ihre Aussage sein. Die Europäer gehören mit an den Tisch. Es darf keinen Friedensprozess ohne die Ukraine geben. Und schon gar nicht darf es sein, wie ich jetzt gerade vor wenigen Minuten las, dass Herr Putin zum 3. Jahrestag erklären wird, er habe den Krieg gewonnen. Dagegen müssen wir uns, und Frau Präsidentin, Sie sind unsere Stimme nach draußen, gemeinsam wehren. Vielen Dank.
Thank you, Daniela. I couldn't agree with you more, especially when it comes to peace negotiations. There cannot be a peace process or peace agreement without the acceptance of Ukraine. They cannot negotiate over the heads of Ukrainians. That is clear. And I think we as parliamentarians bear the responsibility in each of our countries to convey that message also to our heads of state, our governments, that cannot happen. And that is probably the main mission that we have at the moment. Next, I would like to give the floor to Per Pons, please.
Sí, muchísimas gracias, Presidenta. Voy a ser muy breve, solo dos aspectos. En primer lugar, lo que hace referencia, o lo que ha hecho usted referencia al viaje a Middle East, creo que es fundamental, lo he dicho antes en mi intervención previa, es muy importante demostrar con hechos que estamos con la democracia, como lo hizo usted la semana pasada estando en Ucrania, pero también me he olvidado de decirlo en la intervención previa, que efectivamente es importante, es igual de importante que también defendamos la democracia, los valores, los derechos humanos y, por supuesto, el fin del conflicto con dos estados para la situación de Palestina e Israel, y por tanto felicito que se haya decidido hacer este viaje. Pero además creo, en un segundo tema, solo en relación a las observaciones electorales que usted ha comentado, que también se comentan en su informe, creo que tenemos que ser capaces, aparte de las observaciones electorales que tenemos de forma regular, cuando se producen elementos importantes como lo que se ha producido en Rumanía o incluso lo que se está produciendo en Alemania, que tendrá elecciones el domingo, y que hay una clara injerencia de fuerzas extranjeras en el debate político, que seamos capaces de movilizar recursos, aunque sea de emergencia, para poder hacer, entre comillas, observaciones express. Al menos merecemos tener este debate sobre cómo reaccionamos ante estos fenómenos nuevos, ¿no?, que tenemos de injerencias y que se producen de forma inesperada. Por tanto, estos dos aspectos que quería comentar sobre su intervención. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Per Pons. We really need actions. I agree with you in that. And it is true that we are planning a trip also to Israel and the Middle East. And actually, myself and Roberto Montella and some others from the Secretariat, we already paid a visit to Israel and Ramallah about 6 months ago. So this is going to be the second visit that we are going to make during the first and second week of March. And there will be altogether approximately 10 to 15 people from our bureau and secretariat. And I know that it has been a little bit debated here also in the OSCPA whether or not we should discuss the issue of Middle East as much as we have. But as we all know, we are living very turbulent times, and all the wars and crises are intertwined in one way or another. So in a way, we cannot really escape that as well. It is necessary that we know what is happening in the world and go to see firsthand how people react. So, and what you talked about Romania's elections, this is really important, and the responsibility, of course, of the small social media platforms is important. And to my knowledge, at least in the European Union, they are in fact mobilizing resources and new regulations when it comes to these platforms, so that they bear their responsibilities as well. So the next question goes to Mr. Ben Barak from Israel.
Thank you very much. I turn to you, honorable member of parliament from democratic countries that believe in human rights, equality, and freedom. Since October 7, 2023, 504 days ago, 73 hostages have been suffering in Hamas tunnel. They are being tortured every day. Women have been raped, and they are enduring terrible body and mind abuse. Why have we not heard your voice until now? Why has no action been taken? When will this respected forum call for a urgent and immediate action to secure the unconditional release of all the Israeli and foreign hostages held by terrorist organization Hamas? Thank you.
Thank you, Ram Ben Barak. There was no question for me, but I would comment that I also think that the release of hostages is utterly important and should happen immediately. The next speaker I have here is Farah Karimi from the Netherlands.
Thank you, Madam President. We have been here 2 days and discussed, of course, about the turbulent time that we are in it, and especially the situations that Ukrainian people are now facing. We normally, after our winter meeting, we don't have resolutions and so, but I was wondering, and that's actually a question for you, Madam President, in addition to what Daniela de Ridder mentioned, whether you are going to make a statement coming out of these meetings and making clear that really, I think everybody that here spoke was very clear in support for Ukraine, support for that there can't be a decision upon Ukraine without Ukrainians and on Europe without Europeans. And that I think that should in one or other way be articulated after this meeting. So my question is, how are you going to do this? Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Farah. You are not the only one who has been asking me to do this, and I really intend to do it immediately after this session is over. And as we all know, on the 24th of February, which is Monday, I believe, that is the 3rd anniversary of this horrible war. And this conference that we are now having, the winter meeting, is more timely than ever. And I think that we all agree that there can be no peace negotiations or peace without Ukraine being on the negotiation table, and also the Europeans have to be represented there. That is quite clear to all of us. So the next question or comment goes to Kyriakos Hadiani from Cyprus.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin. Ich werde es sehr kurz fassen, und zwar geht es Folgendes. Ich möchte gratulieren Sie persönlich über die Missionen, die Sie machen. Nicht nur das in Israel, aber das ist sehr wichtig zu sagen, dass in der Mission in Ukraine war nicht nur einfach Besuch, das war eine Sitzung vom Präsidium. Das war eine normale Arbeitsweise von our parlamentarische Versammlung on place there, exactly in Ukraine. Und das ist sehr, wichtig zu sagen hier.
Thank you, Kyriakos. I think it was an extremely good gesture on our behalf to hold a bureau meeting together with our parliamentary support team meeting in Ukraine. And we were the first one of all the assemblies, all the international assemblies to actually do that. And I must say that I'm proud of all of you who are so engaged in supporting Ukraine. That is really commendable. I'm happy about that, and thank you for your comments. But I have no further names listed here for comments or questions. So, dear colleagues, we go further on our agenda, which is item number 3, election observation. And under this agenda item, I will first give the floor to those who served as special coordinators for the elections we have observed since the autumn meeting in Moldova, in Georgia, in Uzbekistan, and the United States of America. After each report, I will give the floor to the head of delegation of the country observed, should they wish to comment. Once these reports have been delivered, we will move on to our debate where all participants may take the floor. At the end of the debate, I will again give the floor to the heads of delegation of the countries observed, should they wish to make final comments. Bearing in mind the other items on our agenda, I plan on closing this point at 15:45 at the latest. So I first give the floor to Lucy Potuchkova to report on the presidential election in Moldova. Lucy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, it is an honor to present this report following my role as a special coordinator for 2 rounds of the presidential elections in Moldova. The first of which coincided with a crucial constitutional referendum. I would like to express my gratitude to Johan Buzer and the rest of our OEC PA delegation for the excellent teamwork in this mission. Throughout the 2 rounds, we deployed 54 observers, including 38 members of parliament from 15 different countries, who covered various localities across Moldova, including Chisinau, Balti, Edinet, Rezina, Orhei, and Comrat. Our efforts were closely coordinated with the OSCE, ODIHR, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and the European Parliament. Both our statements of preliminary findings and conclusions are available on our website for your reference. We observed that the elections were administered efficiently and professionally, providing voters with a genuine choice between political alternatives. The high voter turnout, both domestically and abroad, was a clear indication of the Moldovan people's strong commitment to shaping their country's future. Despite the pervasive negative rhetoric targeting candidates from all sides of the political spectrum, often propagated through online social networks, we also witnessed on election day the resilience of direct human connections and constructive dialogue among Moldovan citizens. The elections, however, took place under exceptionally challenging conditions, including foreign interference and vote-buying schemes aimed at influencing the results of the first round, as well as the concurrent constitutional referendum. According to Moldovan authorities and a number of other interlocutors, this foreign interference predominantly comes from Russian Federation and pro-Russian political forces. For further details, I encourage you to review the report released by the Moldova's Intelligence and Security Service in December, which exposes widespread disinformation campaigns, illegal party financing, the organization of violent protests, the exploitation of the Orthodox Church, and cyber attacks likely perpetrated by foreign actors against Moldova's electoral infrastructure. In light of these challenges, Madam President, I welcome the decision to observe the upcoming parliamentary elections in Moldova. I am convinced that having more eyes on the ground will enhance our ability to deter such efforts to undermine the integrity of the electoral process and will support our Moldovan colleagues in ensuring democratic elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. I now give the floor to the delegation of Moldova. There is no one to respond. Does anyone else want to take the floor? If not, I now give the floor to Pascal Alizard to report on the parliamentary elections in Georgia. Pascal, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, chers collègues. C'est un honneur pour moi de vous présenter mon rapport sur notre récente mission d'observation des élections parlementaires du 26 octobre en Géorgie, pour laquelle j'ai eu le privilège de servir en tant que coordinateur spécial. Merci, Madame la Présidente, pour votre nomination à ce poste et surtout merci pour une coopération fructueuse tout au long de cette mission, alors que vous dirigiez notre délégation d'observateurs. Je tiens également à remercier mes collègues observateurs pour leur participation à cet exercice important. Notre délégation comptait au total 60 observateurs, dont 44 parlementaires issus de 22 pays. Notre mission a été un effort conjoint, mené en étroite collaboration avec la mission du BIDDH, mais aussi avec des délégations parlementaires partenaires du Parlement européen, de l'Assemblée parlementaire du Conseil de l'Europe et de l'Assemblée parlementaire de l'OTAN. Notre mission internationale d'observation a compté donc au total 530 observateurs de 42 États participants de l'OSCE, déployés à travers la Géorgie le jour du scrutin, témoignant ainsi de l'importance accordée par la communauté internationale à ces élections. Avec nos partenaires, nous avons préparé ensemble la déclaration des constatations et des conclusions préliminaires de la mission que j'ai présentée le lendemain des élections. Ce document est intégralement disponible sur notre site Internet. Permettez-moi d'en résumer quelques éléments clés. Nous avons d'abord constaté bien que les élections aient offert aux électeurs un large choix avec 18 listes de candidats, elles se sont déroulées dans un contexte de polarisation profonde, un contexte entaché par des préoccupations autour de lois récemment adoptées et de leur impact sur les libertés fondamentales et la société civile. Nous avons noté que les candidats ont généralement pu mener librement leur campagne et que la rhétorique et l'imagerie utilisées étaient quand même fortement polarisées, conflictuelles. Nous avons également relevé que des pressions sur les électeurs, en particulier les employés du secteur public, ont été signalées de manière récurrente durant la campagne. Ce phénomène, combiné à un suivi généralisé des électeurs le jour du scrutin, a soulevé des inquiétudes quant à la capacité de certains citoyens à voter librement sans crainte de représailles. Notre mission a évalué que le cadre juridique offre une base adéquate à la tenue d'élections démocratiques, mais que les amendements fréquents et récents ont constitué un recul soulevant des inquiétudes quant à leur possible utilisation à des fins de gains politiques. L'organisation des élections a été bien administrée, incluant une large campagne de sensibilisation des électeurs à l'utilisation des nouvelles technologies de vote. Pour la première fois, 90% de l'électorat a voté dans des bureaux équipés de technologies de vote électronique. Concernant le financement de la campagne, nous avons constaté un déséquilibre significatif des ressources financières et un avantage marqué pour les candidats sortants, contribuant ainsi à un terrain de jeu politique inéquitable. De plus, l'efficacité du contrôle du financement des campagnes a été affaiblie par une application limitée des règles et par des préoccupations quant à l'impartialité et l'instrumentalisation politique de l'organe de contrôle. S'agissant des médias, nous avons relevé que leur environnement polarisé et l'instrumentalisation des médias privés à des fins de propagande politique ont nui à la couverture impartiale de l'actualité, limitant ainsi la capacité des électeurs à faire un choix éclairé. Nous avons mis également en lumière la sous-représentation des femmes sur les listes électorales et dans la campagne, qui démontre la nécessité d'un engagement accru en faveur de leur participation politique. Enfin, nous avons évalué que le jour du scrutin s'est déroulé de manière généralement bien organisée et ordonnée, mais dans un climat tendu, avec des atteintes fréquentes au secret du vote et des incohérences procédurales, ainsi que des cas signalés d'intimidation et de pression sur les électeurs, ce qui a eu un impact négatif sur la confiance du public dans le processus électoral. En plus de ces constatations et conclusions préliminaires, le BIDDH a désormais publié son rapport final qui inclut un certain nombre de recommandations prioritaires visant à rapprocher le cadre électoral et juridique géorgien des normes internationales et de ses engagements envers l'OSCE. Nous exhortons donc vivement les autorités géorgiennes à mettre en œuvre toutes les recommandations formulées par le BIDDH après les élections et j'espère que notre Assemblée continuera à soutenir et à accompagner ce processus afin de favoriser les améliorations démocratiques nécessaires. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Merci, Pascal, and I now give the floor to the delegation of Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank all the observers, OSCE PA observers that have come to Georgia in October 2024 to observe the elections. Obviously, there has been a lot of noise about Georgia's elections and a lot of myths and misinformation and disinformation. And I want to address some of them. I want to also thank Mr. Alizard for his report. And I must say that I agree on most of the evaluations that he has provided. But let me also point out some issues about the technologies. It was mentioned that for the first time Georgia introduced the voting technologies, and I have to say that for this Georgian Central Electoral Commission partnered with the U.S. vendor company Smartmatic, which is using the devices also in more than 30 countries, including the United States, Canada, Belgium, Estonia, and some other members of this assembly. In addition, election integrity was secured through an auditable system managed by the American company ProV&V, which is one of the only two companies in the United States with the appropriate accreditation from relevant institutions. In order to avoid any miscalculation and to ensure the accuracy and proper work of the technologies, the CEC, the Central Electoral Commission, has also envisaged a random manual ballots recount after the elections that overall ultimately has precisely coincided with the electronic one. The election technologies functioned effectively on the election day, and the audit company, and I'm again reminding you that it's an American company, ProV&V, also concluded that doubling of voters list was impossible. One voter's voice was only one voice, and it's impossible technically to change or modify his or her choice. No case of voting several times with one ID card has taken place. Voters list installed in CEC servers was similar to the one installed in electronic machines. So all this findings from an audit company also point to the fact that there has been no manipulation, no electronic manipulation of the elections as our opponents and some foreign politicians and officials are trying to portray. Now about the irregularities. The public defender of Georgia has stated that there are no serious allegations that can change the election results. Majority of the opposition members, including the former president, Salome Zurabishvili, who publicly claimed having evidence of alleged electoral irregularities, refused to cooperate and provide evidence to the investigation that may suggest that they tried just to discredit the elections on political grounds and on the grounds that they did not like the results of the elections. And I'm also here referring to the fact that the president of Georgia, according to the constitution, cannot be party affiliated and must remain non-partisan, which was also not the fact, because as ODIHR stated in its preliminary conclusion, the president took an active role in campaign by publicly consulting the opposition about pre-electoral coalitions and the composition of prospective government, potentially acting outside of her mandate as a neutral arbiter between the state institutions. And finally, I want to also focus your attention on some of the facts that have been generalized by some players and stakeholders. For example, it was generally reported that there have been cases of ballot stuffing during the elections. I have to tell you that there was only one case of ballot stuffing, and the precinct was closed. The results of the precinct of the polling station were annulled, and the person who perpetrated this crime was detained. Misuse of administrative resources. This is a term which is widely, perceived as to be having an effect on the elections, and rightly so. But in Georgian case, as the ODIHR stated, the misuse of administrative resources meant that mayors and locally elected officials participated in campaign rallies during the working hours. So according to Georgian legislation, this does not represent a crime, and this is not illegal. So mostly when ODIHR refers to misuse of administrative resources, there the participation of mayors and locally elected officials are meant. On the breach of voting secrecy, Yes, we have also noted that the ODIHR has mentioned this in the report. But I have to tell you that the obligation of the Central Election Commission is to provide the voters with everything that is needed to have the voting secrecy. If the voter himself or herself breaches the secrecy of the vote, then there is nothing that the Central Electoral Commission can do. And this was the case in Georgian elections because many voters did not know how to insert the ballot into the new machine, and that was the case when some of them have maybe accidentally shown their ballot because they were trying to insert into the machine. And finally, pressure on voters. This is an important aspect to address because. When ODIHR says that there were pressure on voters, they usually mean that there were cameras installed in polling stations, and also that the observers were tracking the voters. So I have to tell you that the cameras have been installed in polling stations after the last parliamentary elections with the full consent of all parties and of also international organizations that have been part of the electoral reform in 2020. These cameras were installed in order to have the ability to look back at the election day and the election processes if anyone had any complaint about the irregularity during the election day. And let me assure you that these cameras were not pointing at the cabin where the voters were making choice, but at the entrance of the polling stations. And secondly, also the tracking of voters by the party representatives. This is not illegal. And so it's not a crime also to track your own voters, whether they have come or not for statistical purposes. Lastly, I wanted again to express my gratitude to all of you. And also, as I have stated in my statement during the debate, I was very concerned, and we all are very concerned, with the reports about certain groups trying to pressure the ODIHR mission to have statement to influence the final statement of the elections on Georgia. This is a very, very serious breach of OSCE standards and of all international election observation standards, and we hope that this will not happen again anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicholas Samkaradze, for your very comprehensive comments. We will have the debate under the item 3.2. We are now at the item 3.1. So that means that we are going through all the reports first, and then thereafter we go to the debate. And I now give the floor to Azay Guliyev to report on the parliamentary elections in Uzbekistan. Azay, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Dear President Kauma, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to present this report following my role as Special Coordinator and Head of the OSCE Short-Term Observer Mission to the 2024 parliamentary elections in Uzbekistan. I would like to extend my warm thanks to Mr. Sarkis Khandanyan and the rest of our OSCE delegations for their excellent teamwork on this mission. Our cooperation has been both constructive and fruitful. The OSCE was represented through 54 dedicated observers from 25 different OSCE countries, including 42 members of parliament who deployed across Uzbekistan for election day, including Tashkent and its surroundings, Samarkand, Bukhara, and Khiva. We closely coordinated our efforts with the OSCE ODIHR. Our joint mission included nearly 300 observers. The large presence of international observers for these elections highlights our support for Uzbekistan and its people and shows our ever-increasing ties with the country. Our statement of preliminary findings and conclusions are available on our website for your reference. I will not go into the details of our findings and conclusions, but instead will briefly highlight both the progress and shortcomings we observed. In our assessment, we noted that ongoing reforms in Uzbekistan's political institutions, including recent constitutional amendments, have positively contributed to the country's political landscape. However, despite ongoing reforms, we observed that the political environment remains limited with constraints on fundamental freedoms in law and practice. For the first time, parliamentary elections in Uzbekistan were held under the new mixed electoral system, with political parties playing an active role. The elections were technically well prepared. Additionally, the increased gender quota for parliamentary candidates represents a positive development, and we are hopeful that this will further enhance women's participation in public and political life in line with OSCE commitments. At the same time, our assessment highlighted the need to foster a more dynamic and competitive political environment to truly represent citizens' voice. We also noted challenges in meeting international standards, particularly in areas such as media freedom, political party registration, the right to stand, campaign finance, transparency, citizen observation, and the publication of polling station results. Regarding election day, we observed that it was calm and orderly. However, procedural and technical irregularities during voting, counting, and tabulation negatively impacted the process. We acknowledge and greatly appreciate the commitment of Uzbekistan's authorities to continue implementing reforms in line with ODIHR's recommendations. I hope that our observations and the recommendation will help Uzbekistan move further in this direction. I strongly believe that within the OSCE, we should maintain active engagement with our parliamentary colleagues from Uzbekistan, offering our friendship and support as they pursue their reform process. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Azai. And at this point, I would like to extend my gratitude both to you, Azai Guliev, and to Sargis Kandanian. This is the first time ever we have had Azerbaijan and Armenia working in leadership of an observation mission. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is one way of promoting parliamentary diplomacy. I will now report on the general elections in the United States of America. First, I would like to express my gratitude to Pere Pons, who served as head of the OSCE Observer Delegation for our excellent cooperation during this mission. Also, I would like to commend our Assembly's remarkable interest in this mission, as we have deployed on that occasion the largest observer delegation in our Assembly's history, with 164 observers in total, including 131 members of parliament from 40 countries. These extraordinary numbers testify of the seriousness with which we took on this mission and of our commitment to the transatlantic dimension of the OSCE. While, regrettably and at odds with OSCE commitments, the presence of international observers is not permitted in all US states. Our delegates deployed in accordance with the law to different parts of the country, including to the District of Columbia and surrounding states, California, Michigan, Nevada, New York, and Wisconsin. During the mission, we closely worked with a team of the OSCE ODIHR, with which we prepared a joint assessment of the electoral process that I had the honor to present the day following the elections. You may find our mission's full statement on our website, and I will now present some of the main conclusions of our report. We found that the elections demonstrated the resilience of the country's democratic institutions with a well-run process despite a highly polarized environment, with candidates campaigning freely across the country and voters engaging actively. Regarding the campaign, we noted that it was marked by disinformation and instances of violence, including the use of harsh and intolerant language against women and immigrants by one presidential candidate. We also noted with concern repeated unfounded claims about election fraud that negatively impacted public trust. We acknowledged the substantial efforts undertaken to ensure election integrity and security and commended the election officials' professional conduct despite numerous threats against them. Our mission noted that women remain significantly underrepresented as candidates and in high elected office. Furthermore, certain segments of the US citizenry remain disenfranchised, and voter registration and identification remain politically charged issues in the USA. Regaining campaign finance, the record high spending in these elections amplified concerns over unregulated financial contributions and disproportionate advantage for candidates with extensive funding. As for the media coverage, we assessed it as extensive and vibrant, but largely paralleling the partisan political divide, which, along with instances of hostile rhetoric toward journalists, eroded trust in the media. On election day, in the polling stations visited, we assessed the process as well managed, taking place in a peaceful and orderly atmosphere. In addition to the preliminary statement, which is available on our website, the ODIHR just recently published the mission's final report. This report includes a number of recommendations to address the shortcomings observed, which we strongly recommend the authorities to implement and offer our Assembly's assistance in the process. I now give the floor to the US delegation.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And the U.S. delegation, the only disappointment I had in the election is that I invited the President Pierre Koma to come to South Carolina. And I was so looking forward to the President coming because I had the opportunity in this election to have observers from Bulgaria, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Philippines. And in the past, I've been very grateful to have observers from Slovakia, Germany, Poland. In fact, the voters and the election managers are just thrilled when they have observers come by from our European friends. In fact, I know that Peter Buren of Slovakia is here. One year he came with me, and he unjustly accused me of arranging at half the precincts for there to be people of Slovak heritage as we were going from poll to poll. And again, we appreciate election observers. And then America really is unique and maybe a bit hard to understand in that we have a situation where the U.S. Constitution provides that our election laws are actually developed by each state. And so they're different from state to state. But that's actually a benefit because we learn from one state to the next what is best to provide for fair and free elections and transparency. And so it appears very cumbersome, very disorganized, or confusing, but we fulfilled that indeed the democracy is the worst system there is except all the others. And so we're just grateful to have persons to come, and we learn from our election observing in other countries too. And so we invite anyone and everyone as we have elections. Primaries are so important in our state, in our nation. And so actually, for elections, there are actually two elections for every post. One would be a political party primary, and the second would be a general election. And I just want to we appreciate the report that you gave and look forward to anyone who would like to be an observer. It really provides such an opportunity for our citizens to meet people from around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And I must say that it was a very tempting invitation to come and visit South Carolina, but unfortunately I had to stay in the Washington, D.C. area. But rest assured, I will visit your state in the near future. So now we move on to item number 3.2, which is a debate on election observation and post-electoral developments. And since I forgot to give the floor to the Uzbekistani delegation, I will first give the floor to Uzbekistan. You have the floor. I'm sorry about that.
Спасибо. Уважаемая госпожа председатель, уважаемые дамы и господа. От имени делегации Республики Узбекистан позвольте выразить искреннюю признательность делегации наблюдателей Парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ и хочу выразить свои искренние признания. Уважаемые коллеги, мы с удовольствием отмечаем, что за последние годы традиционным стало участие Парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ в избирательных процессах, проводимых в Узбекистане. Особенно наше сотрудничество активизировалось с 2016 года, когда мы впервые полноценная миссия Парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ наблюдала за ходом президентских выборов в Узбекистане. Наблюдатели ПА ОБСЕ приняли самое активное участие в модернизации национальной избирательной системы, в том числе разработке нового избирательного кодекса нашей страны. В 2023 году ПА ОБСЕ активно участвовала в наблюдении за конституционным референдумом и президентскими выборами. А парламентские выборы в Узбекистане, состоявшиеся в прошлом году, 27 октября, стали значительным событием в политической жизни страны, так как впервые были проведены по смешанной избирательной системе. Эти выборы привлекли внимание международных организаций, которые... И многие из высказанных рекомендаций ОБСЕ и БДИЧ ОБСЕ были учтены и в настоящее время внедряются в национальное законодательство и избирательную систему нашей страны. Господин председатель, уважаемые дамы и господа, мы твердо убеждены, что активная деятельность делегации Оли-Маджлиса Республики Узбекистан внесет весомый вклад в укрепление международных усилий по противодействию современным вызовам и угрозам. В завершении позвольте пригласить парламентариев на 150-ю ассамблею Межпарламентского союза, которая пройдет у нас в Узбекистане 5-9 апреля 2025 года. Это историческое событие, которое впервые состоится в Центральной Азии. Представит уникальную возможность для обсуждения ключевых вопросов парламентской дипломатии и многостороннего сотрудничества. Мы уверены, что Ташкентская ассамблея станет важной платформой для укрепления диалога между странами. Еще раз благодарю вас. Спасибо.
Thank you, Ms. Guinora Maruf. I'm sorry about the pronunciation of the name, but thank you for your report. So I have here 6 names who have registered to speak, and the first one is Daniela de Ridder from Germany, and she will be followed by Mark Pritchard from the UK. 2 minutes, please.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin, für die Worterteilung und vielen Dank an die Berichterstatterinnen und Berichterstatter für ihre sehr eingehenden Berichte. Meine Frage richtet sich an Sie, Frau Präsidentin, nämlich bei der Frage, welche Konsequenzen wir aus unseren Wahlbeobachtungen ziehen. Mir ist aufgefallen, bei allen Wahlen, an denen ich Gelegenheit hatte, teilzunehmen, dass längst bevor der Wahltag eintritt und längst bevor wir als Kurzzeitbeobachterin eintreffen, bereits viele Dinge stattgefunden haben, beispielsweise über Social-Media-Kanäle. Dass wir deshalb auch gehalten sind, nochmal zu gucken, dass wir unparteilich sind und alle den Code of Conduct einhalten. Es wurde erwähnt, auch von Ihnen, Frau Präsidentin, dass Geschlechtergerechtigkeit sowohl bei der Kandidatur als auch bei den Fragen, welche Wählerinnen und Wähler an die Wahlurne treten, eine Rolle zu spielen hat. Einschüchterungen von Kandidatinnen und Kandidaten wurden erwähnt und ich glaube, das ist ein wirklich ernsthaftes Problem. Deshalb nochmal die Frage, welche Konsequenzen ziehen Sie, welche Konsequenzen sollten wir ziehen aus den vielen Beobachtungen, die wir gemacht haben? Welche Konsequenzen hat dies beispielsweise für die Briefings von Beobachterinnen und Beobachtern? Welche adäquaten Instrumente müssen wir weiterentwickeln, wenn wir doch wissen, dass Social-Media-Kanäle einen sehr unheiligen Einfluss auf die Wahlen haben können? Und was bedeutet das für die Rolle der Special Coordinator oder der Head of Delegation, die wir einsetzen, die Sie, Frau Präsidentin, einsetzen? Und wie können wir unsere Instrumente besser adaptieren an die Entwicklung, die das Ganze genommen hat? Und schließlich, lassen Sie mich damit enden, was bedeutet dies auch für die Kooperation mit anderen parlamentarischen Versammlungen, insbesondere der des Europarates, die ja möglicherweise sehr viel strenger und heftiger noch Berichte schreibt, als wir dies tun, obgleich ich sagen muss, als ich Head of Delegation war, haben wir mit ODIHR um jedes Wort gefeilscht. Wir haben jedes Wort auf die Goldwaage gelegt und das ausbalanciert. Also deshalb nochmal die Frage an Sie, wie müssen wir auch mit Blick darauf, dass wir ja helfen wollen, den Prozess in der Ukraine fester und sicherer zu machen. Welche Konsequenzen ziehen wir daraus? Was sind Ihre Learnings, Frau Präsidentin?
Yeah, Daniela, that is a very good question, and I've really been thinking about it quite a lot. And one issue is that after the election results have been published and also the final report of ODIHR has been published, I think it's important that we don't leave the country alone to interpret the final report. But we are there to help them to implement the changes that needs to be made in the electoral code and in the electoral process. And normally in the final report, there are recommendations. For example, in the case of Georgia, there were 12 primary recommendations and 16 secondary recommendations, which need to be implemented immediately. And we need to make sure that these changes and improvements actually take place, because otherwise the system will remain the same and the democracy will not progress. So I think the question that you asked is of highly importance, and we also need to emphasize this when we have the seminar prior to elections, before the observers go to the polling stations. Thank you. So the next speaker is Sergei Rashkov from Belarus, and he will be followed by Mr. Per Pons from Spain. All right, Per Pons, you have the floor.
Thank you again, Madam President, and just a few ideas. And I think it's not the first time that I say that. I think we have this bunch of election observation with these reports. I always repeat the same, but it would be great if we can do as an organization a final report every year in which we can release a document regarding the state of democracy. And I think in the end, at least there is one red line in these 4 reports. That is the interference of disinformation. How disinformation, how social networks can revert today the outcome of an election. So I think we have enough material. We have a lot of added value that at least to try to produce a document, final document. This would be my first thing. Second thing is regarding Georgia. It's important to share with the rest of the room that in Valletta and also in Helsinki, we had a lot of debate regarding the election process, etc. I think this is the richness of the organization. My point is that we have to be always with the populations, with the civil society there. So above, let's say, the melee, as the French say. So my recommendation would be that, again, we visit the country and we keep working there. Even if we have criticism, etc., I accept it. The second thing is, I'm not going to comment on what the colleague from Georgia said, but I think all we should read the last resolution of the European Parliament, which is signed by two former members of the OCPA, Reinhold Lopatka, who was vice president, and Ignacio Sanchez Amor, who was also chair of the third committee a while ago. And I think that at least we have to be conscious of what is going on in the presidency. As Tobias Winkler said, there is a backlash of democracy accelerating. So I think that we have to be worried about this. And I think the good answer is to work on that. And just the last point is that 3 weeks ago in Warsaw, we had the meeting of all parliamentarians who are engaged in the EU meetings. And for the first time, at least since I'm a member of these committees, Georgia was absent, was invited to not come. Let's say like that. I think in the end it's a mistake. We need they on board. We need that we talk to them. We need that they are present. Because if in the end we are just isolating them, the situation is that maybe we are making happy some neighbors that are very close to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Per. There were many issues that you pointed out. One thing I would like to emphasize is that the method of ODIHR is, according to my understanding, very scientific, and it has been proved in many places until now, and it's very reliable. But having said that, we all know that distribution of disinformation and foreign influence and all that has become more and more influential during the past years. So it is also essential that within ODIHR organization, they will go through their methods and think of how they can improve and update their methods to today's world. And to my understanding, it has been already, this kind of discussion between OSCE and ODIHR has already been started. So it is very important. And also when it comes to our cooperation with other observer teams, I personally will be meeting the president of Council of Europe and NATO in order to exchange views on how we can take into account these new ways of influencing elections and election results, because it is crucial that we exchange ideas on how we view different elections, and that we continue cooperation, because I personally would not like to see us to go walk different paths from now on. We need to stick together in this very turbulent and very, let's say, polarized and difficult world. The next speaker on my list is Mr. Joe Wilson from the United States, and he will be followed by Pascal Alisade from France.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The U.S. delegation is deeply grateful for your principal leadership of the OSCE-PA during a time of unexpected and incredibly sad proliferating threats to the Helsinki principles. Given these threats, we believe the importance of this institution in advancing the concept of comprehensive security and respect for human rights and democracy has never been greater. As I mentioned this morning, Americans are profoundly concerned by the widespread fraud by the Georgian Dream Party during the October parliamentary election. We see from this that the rigged election in Georgia is another intertwined step in the scheme of war criminal Putin to recreate the failed Soviet Union, occupation of the Transnistria of Moldova, invading Georgia in South Ossetia and Abkhazia, invading Crimea and Donbass in Ukraine, rigging elections in Belarus, losing actually Putin ally, the Assad dictatorship in Syria, but then sadly the invasion of Ukraine 3 years ago Monday. It's obvious that the war criminal Putin will lead to a larger war by appeasing him. There must be peace through strength to defeat the axis of evil, being Moscow, Tehran, and Beijing. Courageously, for months now, tens of thousands of Georgians have taken to the streets to exercise their right to demand a fair and free election. Instead of addressing these legitimate commands, however, Georgian Dream authorities have met these protests with derision and sadly violence. Unfortunately, in the face of the mounting domestic and international criticism, Georgian Dream has exploited any semblance of regular engagement by international leaders to legitimize their fraudulent claims of electoral victory. Sadly, this has included Georgian Dream's mischaracterization of some of the OSCE PA efforts. The rigged election for president of Georgia is clearly revealed by the voter suppression of the dynamic Georgia diaspora of overseas voters, where only 34,500 were able to vote out of almost 1 million that were eligible. Years ago, I visited South Ossetia, where I observed, sadly, where war criminal Putin's occupation occurred, but I was inspired by the patriotism of the people of Georgia for independence and freedom. Overseas votes are very critical, as we saw in the elections in Moldova. I believe the U.S. delegation respectfully suggests that the Assembly exclusively focus its public and private efforts in Georgia to call for new elections. We believe that any future OSCE PA engagement with Georgian Dream should first be agreed upon by the Bureau. The illegitimate Georgian Dream delegation should not be invited to the annual session of the OSCE PA in Portugal. In addition to calling for new elections, we propose the text of our Assembly's 2024 Bucharest Declaration as guiding principles for our individual and collective engagement. This declaration expresses grave concern regarding, quote, Kremlin-supported and aligned efforts to undermine Georgia's fragile democracy and subvert the Georgian population's Euro-Atlantic choice, end of quote. Specifically, this declaration highlights Georgian Dream's, quote, anti-democratic legislation and policies, including its Russian-style law of transparency of foreign influence. As a result, we believe that it's an imperative that the OSCE PA further insist on the complete repeal of the Georgian Repeals Foreign Agent Registration Law, which was copied from Russia, which was copied from Venezuela. We greatly appreciate continued commitment to defend Helsinki principles in the face of grave challenges to democratic governance and collective security, and look forward to working together to advance these shared values in Georgia and across the OSCE region. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson, for your very comprehensive comments. In my opinion, democratic elections reflect the level of democracy and the rule of law in the country where we are observing. That is the highest mark of democracy, how the elections are held. And I think the most important thing is that the will of the people is reflected in the outcome of the elections. We do not work as observers for the existing regime or anybody else for that matter. We just want the will of the people to be reflected. That's all. And I think that should be the guiding line in all our elections. Next, I still have 3 speakers on the list, and the next one is Mr. Pascal Alisard from France, and he will be followed by Mrs. Sondergaard from Denmark.
Oui, Madame la Présidente, merci. J'aurais voulu donner deux précisions sur l'observation en Géorgie suite à l'intervention de notre collègue géorgien. En ce qui concerne la remarque sur le vote électronique, c'est une remarque qui se voulait positive. Et elle se voulait positive tout simplement pour deux raisons. C'est que les machines de vote électronique permettent de réduire considérablement les risques de carrousel avec ce type de mode d'élection. Et en cela, ça nous a semblé être un point intéressant. Et le deuxième point né lui-même de l'observation, c'est que les tensions que nous pouvions percevoir dans les polling stations non équipées de machines électroniques étaient largement supérieures, et ça c'était en secteur rural, que la situation dans les bureaux de vote équipés de machines électroniques dans le secteur urbain. C'est en ce sens que nous avons fait la remarque. Le deuxième point, par contre, concerne l'implantation des caméras. Et si nous avons fait cette observation, et là pour le coup, c'est une observation qui se voulait plus critique, c'est tout simplement parce que nous avons constaté sur le terrain que certaines caméras étaient quand même curieusement orientées et qu'elles ne garantissaient pas à chaque fois le secret du vote. Et là, je me permets quand même d'appuyer sur ce point. Ensuite, vous avez parlé, Madame la Présidente, des relations avec les autres organisations, Union européenne, OTAN, APCE, BIDDH. Moi, je voudrais quand même préciser, mais vous l'avez un peu dit aussi, que notre rôle à nous, c'est d'observer un process électoral, c'est pas d'émettre une opinion en faveur de tel ou tel parti ou de la majorité ou de l'opposition. Et je peux vous assurer qu'en Géorgie, nous nous sommes strictement tenus à ce travail. Vous dire aussi que nous avons consacré beaucoup de temps et beaucoup d'énergie pour produire un rapport commun avec l'Union européenne, l'OTAN et la PCE, et compte tenu de la sensibilité de la situation géorgienne, ça nous a semblé extrêmement important que d'avoir un rapport commun et non pas plusieurs rapports dissonants. Et je terminerai sur la méthode pour faire une suggestion que j'avais déjà faite à l'occasion d'une autre mission. Il me semblerait que nous gagnerions et que le BIDDH gagnerait en qualité si nous reprenions dans une nouvelle observation les résultats des observations précédentes pour pouvoir travailler, comme on le fait d'ailleurs dans de nombreuses industries et dans le privé, dans une logique de processus d'amélioration continue et non pas d'observation segmentée. Et enfin, j'approuve, Madame la Présidente, votre suggestion. Je crois que nous devrions mettre en place une espèce de service après-vente de la mission d'observation qui permettrait d'accompagner l'État considéré dans les progrès à réaliser pour avancer. Et je crois que nos équipes, nous-mêmes en tant que parlementaires, nous y gagnerions en expérience, mais c'est surtout la démocratie qui y gagnerait. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Pascal. I think it's very important what you mentioned, that we should compare also the reports from previous elections so that we could see the progress between different elections and to what direction actually the democracy is going in that particular country. So this is of utmost importance. Now we move on to Mr. Søren Sonnergaard. Sorry, I said Miss previously, and he's from Denmark, and after him,
no problem.
and after him, we will have Luis Grasa from Portugal.
After the discussion we had about election observation in Dublin, we sent a letter to you, Mrs. President, concerning from 7 Nordic Baltic countries. It was Denmark, Finland, Estonia, Iceland, Sweden, Norway, and Lithuania. And the question we raised was countries who invite for election observation, but then later deny some appointed for the mission. Unfortunately, we think that's a very bad practice, because if you want to have election observation, I mean, you have to be observed by the ones representing the organization sending them and not the ones you want to have, because that is not election observation from outside. And unfortunately, we have seen some examples of that. We have seen that earlier in Turkey, but we have also seen it in Azerbaijan at the last election, where there was 76 members from the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly who was denied access to participate from 26 different countries, and even some of them, quite few of them, was members also of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. And the problem is, of course, what to do. I think everybody thinks it's unacceptable, but what can we do about it? And you kindly said that we can discuss that here today. One possibility is, of course, that you stop the observation. You say, then we will not observe. But perhaps that's also in sometimes what is wanted, and it could be counterproductive. So we have to find some other ways to do it. Could it be some ways to do it that we also always mention it at the press conference after the election? That we also always mention it in the press communique? That we always mention it in the report, both the written report and the report giving here to the Assembly, and that when this happens, that we take it up as a point on the agenda and discuss why. What is the problem? That could be a way of bringing awareness of that, because otherwise I would be a little bit afraid that the few examples we have had could spread to other countries. So could you think that this could be some ideas which can be used, or how do we proceed and conclude on this matter? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Søndergaard, for that question. When it comes to Turkey, I was on a visit to Turkey just 2 weeks ago, and I raised this issue into discussion both with the speaker and also with the vice president whom I met with. So I think each and every country with which we face this kind of issue has to be dealt separately, and they have to know that all our observers that we offer for observation mission have to be approved of. That it is a clear message. Sometimes we have issues with that, but they all need to be dealt with. But at this point, like I said, I raised the issue to the attention of Turkish decision makers. And the next speaker is Luis Grasa from Portugal, who will be followed by Mr. Mammadov from Azerbaijan.
Thank you, Madam President. Since my appointment as special representative of South Caucasus and following the elections observer mission in Georgia, we've tried to be closely following all the developments on Georgia and Armenia, and in such a very radicalized environment. And I would like to say a few words about that, because we had the opportunity to call to refrain from violence after the elections riots and respect the fundamental freedoms of assembly and expression, given concerning reports coming from Tbilisi. I've done myself, and I've joined the president of the second committee again doing that. The protests in Tbilisi are still ongoing, and at the present, no effective or formalized dialogue is taking place between the government and the demonstrators, including opposition parties, which are boycotting their mandates. We have seen reports that detainees have allegedly been subjected to ill treatment while in custody, as well as other reports of violence, and it remains vital that investigations must be conducted transparently and swiftly. We should closely and objectively continue to monitor the political process and encourage all the stakeholders to make the best use of OSCE frameworks and instruments to ensure the upholding of Helsinki principles, just as the other mechanisms like the incident prevention and response mechanism meeting and continuing to demonstrate the added values of the OSCE to the country, trying to disregulate the environment, political environment in Georgia. But I want to say one or two things more. I listened Mr. Joe Wilson saying that we should not invite the delegation, the Georgia delegation, to the meeting in Oporto. And I want to ask you to think with this matter with me, because some of us have defended the same thing on the past with the Russia delegation. And now some of us are discussing peace with Putin. So what I'm saying is we need to think if when there is a problem, if the best way is to expulse or not invite them, that country to our discussions. I believe when 50 years ago this organization was created in Helsinki, that Henry Kissinger was not falling in love with Brezhnev. I think Kissinger knew that Brezhnev was a tyrant and that Soviet Union was not a democracy, but they agree sometimes, times to time, it's better that we have a place to talk on table and to say eyes to eyes what I think from you. I want to have that space here. I'm a parliamentarian. We are all parliamentarians. So I believe it's better to sit everyone on a room and say eye to eye what we think about it. I want to say to Nichols, the head of the delegation in Georgia, that we should move forward, that we should release the political prisoners in Georgia, that we should have mechanisms to dialogue with opposition. I want to say that to Nicholas. I don't want that he doesn't come to our meetings. I want that all of us can say that to him. And actually, in these 2 days in Vienna, I've met with Nicholas, the head of the delegation of Georgia. I've met with Terentelli and Tina Bugashova, leaders of opposition in Georgia. I've met with each one of the protesters that were on our door outside and talked with them, each one. I've met with the Armenian delegation, the new head of delegation, the ambassador in Vienna from Armenia. I've met with the opposition in Armenia. I've met with Azerbaijan, the new, I've met with Sargis from Armenia, the new head of delegation of Azerbaijan, and the ambassador in Vienna. And I think that's what we should do. When we have problems, we should listen to everyone, because we don't support opposition or governments. We are representing people. So we have to work for the progress of people. That's it. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Luis. And our next speaker on the list is Mr. Mammadov from Azerbaijan, and he will be followed by Mr. Selam Altinok from Turkey.
Madam President, thank you very much for giving me the floor. Actually, I asked for the floor to react a remark from my Danish colleague regarding the blacklisting certain parliamentarians. And to begin with, I'm here new. I'm just observing how discussions are held. I see that there are parliamentarians here, most of them actually believe what they say. They try to help advancing human rights and democracy on our continent. There is no question in it. But unfortunately, there are also cases when those noble notions are misused for exercising political pressure on one or another country. Azerbaijan is a vivid example. For 3 decades, our people, 1 million of them, were ethnically cleansed, and we were raising the human rights issue in relation to those ethnically cleansed Azerbaijanis. Everyone was looking away. They were referring to the lack of information, lack of interest, etc., and so on. Okay, that's fine. But suddenly, after the 2020 war, when Azerbaijan finally restored its territorial integrity, and in 2023, when it's fully restored its sovereignty, interest emerged there. and in a one-sided manner. Of course, those who try to focus that in a distorted manner, they don't care about human rights or establishing peace in our region. They were misusing these noble notions and displaying clear discrimination against our people based on race and ethnicity. And anyone who violates our sovereignty and demonstrates racial discrimination deserve to be blacklisted. And the government of Azerbaijan exercised its sovereign right and barred certain individuals from entering the country because, again, they trampled on the very basic of the human rights, inadmissibility of racial discrimination. And as for this situation on the ground, we try to solve all the issues with our my neighbor Armenia. Certain things have been settled. There are many more challenges, of course. We try to solve the remaining issues via diplomacy. Actually, being optimistic is a core of diplomacy. Yes, challenges are huge, but what can we do? We should try to solve the issues in a political manner. Anyway, therefore, I will caution this esteemed assembly. Be cautious when it comes to sensitive regional settings, like in our case or elsewhere. Madam, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mammadov. And next speaker is Selami Altinok from Turkey.
Sayın Başkan, değerli meslektaşlarım, hepinizi saygıyla, hürmetle selamlıyorum. Özellikle Sayın Başkan'ın Türkiye'ye yapmış olduğu ziyaretin çok verimli geçtiğini bizler adına belirtmek istiyorum. İnanıyorum ki Sayın Başkan da aynı şekilde benim gibi düşünüyor. Biz o ziyaretten çok büyük memnuniyet duyduk. Diğer yandan değerli arkadaşlar, tabii konumuz ağırlıklı olarak Ukrayna gündeme geliyor. Ukrayna ile alakalı Avrupa'nın tutumunun Rusya'yı cesaretlendirdiği noktasındaki tavırların çok doğru olmadığını düşünüyorum. Yani Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Cumhurbaşkanı Sayın Recep Tayyip Erdoğan'ın Ukrayna meselesi konuşurken Zelenski'yi davet edip Türkiye'de ağırlamasının karşılığında Avrupa'nın biraz da mahcup bir şekilde ve parçalanmış bir şekilde Avrupa Birliği'nin bütün üyelerinin dahi çağrılmadığı toplantılarda bu konunun gündeme gelmesinin gelecekte Ukrayna ile alakalı yapılacak olan çalışmalara zarar verebileceğini düşünüyorum. Avrupa kendi güvenliğinin Ukrayna üzerinden sağlanabileceğini, kendi güvenliğinin Suriye'deki savaşın bitmesiyle sağlanabileceğini, İsrail'deki Orta Doğu'daki karışıklığın bitmesiyle sağlanabileceğini anlamalı ve özellikle de savunmaya yönelik olan tedbirlerini kendi üzerinden, kendi sorumlulukları üzerinden yerine getirmeyi artık öğrenmeli diye düşünüyorum. Böyle havale ederek farklı noktalardan yardım bekleyerek Avrupa'nın güvenliğini sağlayabilmemiz mümkün değil diye düşünüyorum. Ayrıca Danimarkalı meslektaşımın söylediği, Türkiye'de de doğru, Sayın Başkan'ın gündeme getirdiği görüşmelerdeki konuyla alakalı dostlarımızın, buradaki meslektaşlarımızın Türkiye'yi anlaması lazım gelir. Yani Danimarka'da oturarak Türkiye'yi değerlendirmek çok kolay. Türkiye 40 yıldır terörle mücadele ediyor ve 50 bine yakın insanını kaybetti. 50 bin insanı kaybettiği bir ortamda o terörle mücadele ederken ve Türkiye'ye karşı savaşan bir terör örgütü varken bu terör örgütlerini bulundukları ülkede destekleyen ve onlara arka çıkan hiçbir milletvekilini bugüne kadar Türkiye'ye girişlerine müsaade etmedik. Bundan sonra da etmemiz mümkün değildir. Aynı şeyi bir Fransa'nın, bir Almanya'nın, bir Amerika'nın da yapacağından kuşkum yok ki yapıyorlar. Böyle bir şeyi beklerken insanların biraz empati yapmasında fayda var. Türkiye çok farklı sıkıntılarla uğraşıyor. PKK ile uğraşıyor, yetmiyor. DAEŞ ile uğraşıyor, yetmiyor. Çevremizde Ukrayna bize en yakın ülkelerden bir tanesi. Ukrayna'da savaş var, Irak'ta savaş var, Suriye'de savaş var ve Gazze'de büyük bir katliam var. Şimdi bu kadar sıkıntılı bir ortamda Danimarka'da 4-5 milyonluk bir ülkede yaşayıp çok rahat bir şekilde demokrasi havarisi kesilmek kolay. Ama 50.000 insanınızın öldüğü ve terörün hala size tehlike arz ettiği ve her gün askerinize, polisinize, öğretmeninize saldırdığı bir ortamda ve bunları övenlerin Türkiye'ye girebilmesini istemek biraz da haksızlık oluyor diye düşünüyorum. Hepinize saygılar sunuyorum.
Thank you, Mr. Altinok, and I would like to extend my gratitude also to you during my visit to Turkey. In my opinion, it was a very good visit for both for Turkey and for our team which visited Turkey. Thank you. So I see no further names on the list of speakers, and therefore we are ready to move on to item number 4, which is
Yes. Sakartvelo.
oh, there is after all Nicholas Samgaradze from Georgia who wants.
Yeah,
to
I thought you would give us the final word about the debate. So I wanted a very quick comment on. I know Mr. Wilson has a personal interest in attacking us, and this is no surprise and no news to us. But it's one thing to criticize, and the other thing is to tell lies, which is unacceptable, I think, in this room. When speaking about Russia and Venezuela, I want to tell the audience here that there are only 4 countries in the world that Georgia does not have diplomatic relations with. And out of those 4 countries, Russia and Venezuela are 2 countries, and the other 2 are Syria and Nicaragua. So please, when you make statements, I think it's worth to do a little research also about Georgia's diplomatic relations and about the countries that Georgia is partnering with. Furthermore, I have to tell you that the law on foreign transparency was copied not from Venezuela or from Russia, but was copied from the American Foreign Agents Registration Act. I will not go into other details of his statement, but I want to tell this distinguished audience also that we have communicated to the OSCE-PA leadership the readiness to sit down and discuss and implement the recommendations that were given in the final report about the election observation, and we did it as early as December last year. So I want to reiterate here that we are committed to work together with the OSCE-PA and also OSCE ODIHR on these recommendations. We were also hoping that the visit of the OSCE-PA leadership would give a good start to working on these recommendations. But as you remember, the visit was postponed due to the fact that our radical opposition that is boycotting the parliament, they did not express their readiness to meet with the delegation from the OSCE-PA. So when we speak about the situation in Georgia, we have to be very objective, and we have to give the full picture about the situation and not just one-sided or politically, let's say, or one-sided, let's say, reporting where political interests or other vested interests are clearly demonstrated. So again, in conclusion, I want to thank everyone who participated in the observation mission, because this observation mission was very important, and this observation mission basically also dissipated or debunked many myths that were about or around Georgian elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think we now need to move on to item number 4 because of the time limit which we have. So we talk about financials, and I give the floor to our treasurer, Mr. Johan Buser. Johan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President and members of the Standing Committee. Dear colleagues, it's an honor to address you today and present the financial standing of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Our commitment to financial transparency and stability remains strong, and I'm pleased to report on the state of our finances for the 2023-2024 financial year and the budgetary outlook for the future. On the 30th of September, we closed the books for the 32nd financial year of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. While a more descriptive summary has been sent out in the written Treasurer's report, I will highlight now the main points today and look forward to answering any questions from the Standing Committee. The 2023-2024 financial year was closed with a modest surplus of income of 20,000 euros. The Russian Federation have, for the second consecutive year, dishonored their financial commitment to OSCE by not paying their annual contribution, which constitutes to 6% of the total budget. Owing to extra budgetary contributions and the International Secretariat's ability to implement cost efficiencies, this shortfall has, however, been addressed without making withdrawals from the budgetary reserves. In this regard, I want to emphasize my gratitude to Secretary General Roberto Montella and the staff of the International Secretariat for contributing to this Assembly's impactful activities while also ensuring the optimization of our resources. The total income amounted to almost 4 million euros for the financial year. Of our expenditures, salaries and staff expenses represented 70% of our budget expenditure, followed by operational and administrative costs as the second largest expenditure at 10%. In the annual report, it could also be noted that we have an emergency reserve which amounts to 50% of the total budget. The budgetary reserves, which over time shall amount to 100% of the total budget, are currently negative. And in accordance with the provisions of the OSCE financial rules and regulations, an audit has been carried out by the external auditor from the private company Deloitte. During this year, the financial audit focused on evaluating internal controls. The auditor provided some comments on non-segregation of duties within the Secretariat, which is an aspect of expense authorization within an organization. The auditor recommended management to closely monitor the financial development and take a critical approach to financial reports, but also noted that no misstatements were identified related to this matter. In other areas, the auditor identified some misstatements that were adjusted during the period of the audit. And in the performance audit, a specific focus was placed on employment contracts, dependency allowances, and guidelines for employee benefits. The performance audit did not give rise to any material critical comments, but gave some recommendations to follow up in order to strengthen our organizational structure. In connection with the dismissal of a former employee, the auditor noted that a disciplinary committee was convened to review the dismissal. The disciplinary committee concluded that there were insufficient grounds to dismiss the former employee without termination notice and recommended strengthening the regulatory framework. The auditor also evaluated compensations for dependency allowances and recommended the OSCE to implement appropriate controls in this regard. So, colleagues, in line with my responsibilities as Treasurer, I will soon, assisted by the Secretary General, begin preparations for the draft budget for the next financial year. An initial budget proposal will be presented to the Bureau in Copenhagen at the Danish Parliament on Monday, the 7th of April. This presentation will provide an opportunity for Bureau members to review and comment on the draft before it is shared with the Standing Committee for final adoption at the annual session in Porto. The budget proposal for 2025-26 financial year will consider several factors and perspectives that already have been raised by you in the Standing Committee. The first and foremost priority is to ensure funding in the budget for the Assembly's political goals and activities, including the statutory meetings and other engagements, such as the Parliamentary Support Team for Ukraine and ad hoc committees. Election observation remains a cornerstone of the OSCE-PA's mandate and an absolute priority in the budget. To ensure adequate funding for the election observation missions, the budget will take into consideration the calendar for expected missions during the financial year, but also ensure readiness to engage in unforeseen elections that might occur during the period. The OSCE-PA budget have to reflect our commitment to promote free and fair elections across the OSCE region, together with ODIHR and our partner assemblies, PACE, NATO-PA, and the European Parliament. The draft budget will also seriously consider the critical challenge of the non-payment of contributions by the Russian Federation. If the Russian Federation decides not to pay their dues before the end of this financial year, its outstanding contributions since the 2022-23 financial year amount to 760,000 euros, or 18% of the total budget. Importantly, the budget proposal needs to address this shortfall of funds to ensure that the organization continues to operate effectively and deliver on our core mission. I would also like to take the opportunity here today to express my gratitude to the delegations that have made extra budgetary contributions, which are essential for supporting specific projects, events, and initiatives that align with the Assembly's goals. Your efforts, financial and logistical, are invaluable in ensuring the success of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly's activities. I will now conclude by noting that the OSCE-PA continues to navigate a complex financial landscape. Despite this, the annual report shows that we deliver on the Assembly's promise to promote peace, democracy, and cooperation across the OSCE region, while also ensuring financial sustainability. In this regard, I would once again like to extend my gratitude to Secretary General Roberto Montella and the entire International Secretariat for their dedicated work. Looking ahead, I am committed to leading our common efforts in drafting of a budget that remains aligned with our political priorities, while also balancing the challenges resulting from the Russian Federation's non-payment. The strategic advice of the Standing Committee is always instrumental in shaping a budget proposal along these lines. I am grateful for the continued support and look forward to hear your comments and inputs here at the meeting or in other occasions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johan. Are there any comments or questions? It seems like your report was very comprehensive, so there are no comments at this point. If not, then we move on to item number 5, which is report on the Secretary General of the OSCE. And I now give the floor to our Secretary General, Mr. Roberto Montella.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you to all of you. These have been 2 very busy days. I have admired your stamina in so many committee meetings, plenaries, the side events. We really do very intensive work here. And I think many have said we've met in very challenging times. I think I would say even unprecedented times. And it was very interesting to hear the political opinions of the representatives of 1 billion citizens in the OSCE, especially in this time. You know, I came to this meeting a little bit discouraged from my last visit to Kiev and seeing in the eyes of my friends in Kiev their reactions to some statements that were coming in. But today I've heard that there is the representatives of the public opinions in Europe, in the North Atlantic, in the space that goes from Vancouver to Vladivostok, who can express very strongly their opinion and also hopefully make their governments hear. So I thank that very much. And I would like to thank also for the strong statements that we've heard here from the US delegation, both yesterday from Mark Weezy and Joe Wilson today. I would like to thank you, Madam President, for convening us today here, but also in particular for inviting Vladimir Kara-Murza. I think this morning was a very touching moment. A person who has suffered a very unfair treatment for his political beliefs. And I would like to also publicly thank Congressman Cohen, who has so much worked for this result. He would have liked to be here. I met him 2 weeks ago in Washington. He expressed his disappointment for not being able to be here, but of course his happiness to see that Vladimir Kara-Murza addressed us today, and this moment, I think iconic moment for us in this assembly. And thank you, Madam President, to also keep on inviting guests that make our assembly a little bit higher also in the major media, let's say. I would like to thank all the members. If you read the reports of the President, my report, and all the reports of the special representatives and heads of ad hoc committees, the amount of activities that you have managed to do. I mean, we are just reporting here from Dublin autumn meeting to today. I mean, it's 4 months with a holiday in between, but the amount of activity is incredible. I think the Secretariat is trying to keep pace with all the activities that the President and other leaders are trying to suggest to us. I hope the Secretariat is servicing well all these activities, but I really thank you, Madam President, for keeping us very busy. I thank all the members of the Bureau who were in Kiev last week. As you said, Madam President, this was a unique event. President Stefanchuk, the President of the Ukrainian Parliament, mentioned that it was the first time that a parliamentary assembly held a statutory meeting in their parliament. It was indeed the first time also that the OSCE ever held a bureau outside its headquarters, apart from one that was hosted by Portugal in 2008, I think, during the presidency of João Soares. So thank you very much for the Bureau members and the members of the PSTU who made the trip to Kiev, as was recorded here this morning. I think it was a very good testimony to the fact that we were there while some concerns were coming from outside Kiev. And I thought that our presence there also gave some comforts to our Ukrainian colleagues. I thank the members who are also have gone to Serbia, who are about to go to Tajikistan in these field of activities that you, Madam President, together with Andreas Baker, have triggered again in the OSCE. We used to do them some years ago. This is a very good activity and very welcomed by the countries where they host election OSCE field missions. So also the people from the OSCE who work on those missions really appreciate parliamentarians coming and see their work. And as being someone who has served in the OSCE field operations for 10 years, I remember how much I appreciated when members of parliament would come to visit Bosnia, Kosovo, Montenegro, Serbia, where I was serving. I would like to now move on to a little bit to the election, because there was a big election debate before. And Daniela De Ridder mentioned what are the lessons learned from this period of many elections. So I'll take it from there and suggest and go maybe through those who have comments to propose what the Secretariat has been doing in terms of lessons learned from the last election observation missions. So we will introduce a new election compact. We've already started to work internally in the OSCE. We feel that, as many of you have said, the election is not only the election day working on the election observation, but it's a longer term process. So from the selection of the leadership, which is normally an exercise that the President does on the advice of the Secretariat, once a leadership is selected in the person of the special coordinator appointed by the CIO and the head of the OSCPA delegation, the Secretariat will start to engage with these two leaders and try to also have a meeting between these two leaders and the entire parliamentary delegation of the country where we observe. We've actually done this meeting this morning with the Albanian delegation. So we just had this morning and we've started already to implement this new compact. Then, in order to better prepare our leadership and to make sure that our leadership is fully equipped with all the necessary knowledge of an election observation, we will organize pre-electoral visits. We've done this sometimes in the past, but we will try where it's possible, and of course, provided that the resources are there, to do this on a regular basis a month before an election observation. So bring the entire leadership together with our staff and meet all the election stakeholders in the country where we observe. And then the month that goes from the pre-electoral visit to the actual election operation is a month where the leadership can get acquainted with what's happening, as seen the local players on the ground. So we'll be better equipped once we are in the ground to engage with the other electoral observers, but we'll have the tools to better understand the reality on the ground. A lot has been said about our partners, the ODIHR, the parliamentary assemblies of Council of Europe, NATO, and the European Parliament. I would like to stress the priority, I think, from us as OSCE institution is to preserve the integrity of the election observation by strengthening the ODIHR. The ODIHR does an incredible work. They send people on the ground for 2 months, professionals who are deployed throughout the countries, who are in the capital. People who have done elections, you will see their CVs sometimes on this leaflet that you are given when you go to an election observation. They've observed elections in a plethora of countries. So they are the ones on the ground who get the real serious assessment of the situation. We need to work very closely with the ODIHR. Our leadership needs to engage together with the ODIHR and strengthen the ODIHR. I've heard a lot of reports following some elections that, you know, because you are not happy with the election results, calls to change the methodology of the ODIHR. I remind members here that in the past, the calls to change the methodology of the ODIHR were really the issues that sometimes were used by some participating states who don't like the ODIHR and the OSCE entering into observing their elections. I will not name countries here, but you know the ones I'm referring to. So I would not feed into this narrative, but I think we need to strengthen the OSCE, ODIHR. In terms of cooperation with the other parliamentary assemblies, we have a peculiarity in the Parliamentary Assembly, Madam President, is that your appointment of the leadership is non-partisan, although sometimes we try to find balance between the political background of the leadership. But by fundamental choice, we try to have a gender balance, a geographical balance, also political balance. But the exercise that once you have appointed a person to this leadership is not a partitic, let's say, exercise. The person is there with its own integrity, makes a judgment, regardless of whether in that country they have a political party affiliated friends, whether they are socialist, EPP. And mind that in the OSCE, which is a region that goes from Vancouver to Vladivostok, there is at least 35 countries who do not enter into this logic, very, let's say, Brussels or Strasbourg center of EPP, ALDE, so there are other countries. So we have to make sure that access to leadership is granted to all the countries, but that also the strong component of political affiliation is diluted in our assembly, because in other assemblies it's very strong. In the Council of Europe, you will have the leadership of an election observation, which is selected exactly based on your political affiliation, and it goes on a rotation. So in one election, you will have a head of the mission from EPP, the next one will be Socialist, ALDE, and then they rotate. So it depends on which mission you are assigned to. And this, I think, would be clever to avoid in the OSCPA, because we are not so much Brussels-centered in that sense. Some comments on the election debate this morning. So cooperation with PACE and NATO-PA, we try to cooperate as much as possible. I think your meeting in Strasbourg will be very important also to make sure that we keep the integrity of this exercise. And as you said, Madam President, the scientific approach to this, because we don't want to be drawn into political battles when we make an electoral assessment on the ground. Words has been mentioned about the election process in Ukraine. We discussed this last week in Kiev. You will remember also that in the Minsk Accords, Madam Merkel mentioned elections will be something that the OSCE will take care of. I would caution really on the role of the OSCE in an eventual post-conflict situation in Ukraine. The OSCE can do a work of election monitoring, but running an election, and I've been an election international observer in Bosnia where we were running the election, we were the administration. I don't think that this is going to be possible because of finance, because of security in Ukraine in the future. So we must be very careful when we think that the solution to a future election in Ukraine will be a role of the OSCE. Pascal Alizar, you mentioned follow-up to election observation. Also, Pere was mentioning this. Exactly, this will be part of our compact. So a pre-electoral visit, a mission on the ground, and then the follow-up. I think it's very important that we engage, especially if we have made some recommendations in some countries, that we call the country that we have observed into accountable, and that the country develops let's say, a secure path to implement the ODIHR recommendations that the ODIHR makes normally in its final assessment. Countries who deny visas to observers. Thank you very much, Sorosan, for these remarks. We have in our code of conduct, a very stringent code of conduct, of course, for our own observers. But it's true that the country who is being observed cannot decide on the selection of which are the observers. So we must make sure that I think we do mention it in our final report. Maybe we should also mention it publicly in the press conference, as you have said. I don't know what other tools we have. I would not always go for the, let's say, the nuclear option of withdrawing the mission, because I don't know if that is useful at all. But we've had this challenge and we will look into it. I think I've covered most of the issues on the election part. A few other points, Madam President. I would like to say that the Secretariat, which I have the honor to lead, and with the Standing Committee gave me again the responsibility last July in Bucharest, is doing an excellent job. I mean, I would like to thank here publicly all my colleagues. I think some of you have already mentioned them, but they do a fantastic job in the so many activities that we are doing, and I think they really deserve a word of praise from all of you for the great work that they do, and I'm very proud of leading this team. I would like to thank Johan Buzar for your kind words and for your leadership in our finances. I'd like to thank actually publicly Gustavo and Stephen, who are the ones who are mostly involved in the budgeting and in the administration of our assembly. I think we have really developed with Gustavo and Stephen a very frugal approach to our finances. We have managed to do a lot of activities with the limited resources, and also I'm very much appreciating all the advice that was given to us by the external independent audit, Deloitte. This is the third year that we do it in a row with Deloitte. I think they give us very good advice, but I'm pleased that the report also this year was very positive for us. The OSCE as a new leaderships, you've seen them in the meetings from the new Secretary General, the new ODIHR, the freedom of the media, and the new High Commissioner for National Minorities. I've already engaged with them. I've created excellent relationship with them. I'm very encouraged by this leadership. I think that we can work with them very well. In conclusion, I want to thank, as the Treasurer did also, the countries who are contributed to our budget, but also giving extra budget contribution, Austria in particular, and Denmark for hosting our two offices in Copenhagen and Vienna, and all the countries who are providing additional funds for secondments, but also who have reached the 10,000 euro limit that was requested in one of the OSCPA resolutions. This is it from my side, Madam President. Thank you very much. Thank you for your leadership. I hope that we will be busy until July, and we will look forward to working with you until the end of your term. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. I'm glad that I've been able to keep you busy during this year. And also on my behalf, I would like to thank you and all the members of the Secretariat. You have done excellent job. And there are a lot of activities that parliamentarians require, and you have been able to fulfill all our hopes and expectations. So thank you for that. Anybody wanting to take the floor? I suppose Friday afternoon is taking its toll. So let's move on to item number 6, which is report by the chair of the subcommittee on the rules of procedure. Mr. Pascal Alisat, you have the floor.
Oui, Madame la Présidente, merci, chers collègues. Madame la Présidente, je voudrais tout d'abord vous remercier d'avoir bien voulu me renouveler à la présidence de la sous-commission du règlement. Mon rapport écrit a été distribué dès le début de cette semaine. Vous avez donc pu en prendre connaissance. Et si vous en êtes d'accord, je vous y renvoie. Je suis prêt, bien évidemment, à répondre à toute question. Je me contenterai de dire ici que nous n'avons pas pu tenir une réunion à Vienne cette fois-ci en raison d'un agenda bien chargé, ce que nous comprenons, et que nous n'aurons sans doute a priori pas d'autres réunions avant notre session annuelle de Porto, sauf en cas d'urgence, auquel cas une réunion en visio est toujours possible. La seule question urgente en suspens a été débattue en bureau et a trait à l'organisation des élections et en particulier de la faculté de vote anticipé au second tour de l'élection du président ou de la présidente de notre Assemblée, question récurrente que le secrétariat doit pouvoir traiter d'ici Porto en explicitant la solution qu'il propose pour permettre en fait à nos collègues qui, pour une raison impérieuse, ne peuvent demeurer jusqu'au second tour, qui peut avoir lieu à la toute fin de nos travaux et afin qu'ils puissent tout de même y participer. Nous attendons une solution transparente, simple et claire qui ne dépend pas du règlement, puisque en fait cela relève de l'organisation matérielle de l'élection. Il revient donc au secrétariat de la communiquer en toute transparence et suffisamment longtemps à l'avance, avant Porto, pour que chacun d'entre nous puisse en prendre connaissance. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Pascal. Anyone, any comments? If not, then we move on to item number 7 on our agenda, which is information on future meetings of the OSCPA this year, 2025. As customary, our Bureau will meet this spring in Copenhagen on the 6th and 7th of April. It will also meet on the eve of the next Ministerial Council meeting, which will take place in Vienna on the 4th and 5th of December. Our annual session will take place in Porto, in Portugal, from 29th of June to the 3rd of July. As mentioned previously, the Grand National Assembly of Turkey has offered to host our 2025 autumn meeting. I encourage the Standing Committee to warmly accept this generous proposal. Do any of our future hosts wish to take the floor now? If not, then we move on to item number 8 on our agenda, which is any other business. Does anyone wish to raise any other business? Okay. Yes, Nikita Poturayev, you have the floor.
Madam President, dear colleagues, I just wanted to summarize a little our work. We live in time when words matter only if they are backed by action. That is why today I want to speak about concrete steps that we can and worth us to do without delay as a parliamentary assembly and as organization as a whole. First, as Vice Speaker of Ukrainian Parliament, Olena Kondratyuk rightly pointed out during our event on Russia's crimes against Ukrainian children and women, we can no longer remain silent. The time has come to once again invoke the Moscow mechanism in response to the mass, forced, and violent indoctrination of Ukrainian children in the temporarily occupied territories. Second, we cannot ignore the fact that national minorities and indigenous people are subjected to systematic repression, both in occupied Ukraine and within Russia itself. Our Commissioner on National Minorities would urgently begin investigating these crimes. Third, independent media are under threat not only in authoritarian states, but also in democratic ones. The suspension of US financial support has led to a deep crisis, and our special representative on media freedom should act immediately to assess and address the consequences. Fourth, the preparation for elections in complex and lengthy process, especially under wartime conditions. We cannot wait until the summer meeting. Therefore, I urge our Assembly to authorize the President to immediately appeal to ADIR with a proposal to intensify preparation measures so that when the time comes, democratic processes in Ukraine can take place properly. Fifth, and finally, the most important point, we must act together. I call on participating states to stand united. I call on you to take greater responsibility for our collective security. I call for deeper cooperation in the name of sustainable, just and guaranteed peace. And let there be no doubt, inaction comes at a price. Are we ready to pay some additional price to what we already are paying? Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita. Rest assured that Ukraine will remain on top of our agenda. And there is another speaker, Mr. Toffoli from Italy. You have the floor.
Grazie Presidente. Solo per due informazioni riguardo all'agenda. Ne abbiamo parlato nell'ambito del forum dei paesi del sud-est Europa che è coordinato dall'amico Kyriakos, ne abbiamo parlato anche nell'ambito del comitato del CCT del terrorismo. Abbiamo dato la disponibilità per ospitare, stiamo organizzando per il 5 e 6 giugno di quest'anno una conferenza sulla criminalità organizzata nella regione dell'Oce con dei panel dedicati e dei focus sulla criminalità, sulla lotta alla criminalità organizzata nei paesi del sud-est Europa, panel sulla lotta al terrorismo, ma anche stiamo facendo una valutazione di trattare anche l'ambito che riguarda l'anticorruzione. La sede della conferenza sarà la stessa degli incontri che abbiamo avuto con le Nazioni Unite, quindi la Camera dei Deputati. Poi un'altra, volevo intervenire anche riguardo a quanto detto questa mattina in plenaria. Volevo depositare formalmente il documento della mia delegazione, sottoscritto da tutta la delegazione italiana all'OSCE, riguardo a una richiesta di organizzare un momento di incontro, una conferenza proprio dedicata alla pace dell'Ucraina con tutte le delegazioni dell'Assemblea parlamentare OSCE. Quindi lo deposito poi formalmente al segretariato, alla Presidenza. Grazie.
Thank you, Mr. Toffoli. Your suggestions sound to me very timely and very interesting, important also in this time. So I cannot see any others wanting to take the floor. So, dear colleagues, this concludes our meeting, and I would like to wish you all a safe trip back home and try to have some rest during the weekend. Bye-bye.